Hi, I'm Alex Paulton. I'm here at the Public Tech Connect event with Armin Derpmanns. He's the Vice President of Marketing and Operations over at Toshiba. And I understand Toshiba's a whole new company now, isn't it?
Well, it's a new old company, as we would like to say. The key thing is that we've gone private in the end of last year, and the company defined a new focus of where the company is going to be active in, and within that, as I'm coming from the semiconductor part, the exciting statement was that Toshiba is still focusing on power semiconductors, and we are enhancing the presence and activity in that field.
Well, Toshiba has a deep legacy in the electronics industry that goes back decades. At what point did Toshiba decide to make this big move?
Well, it was there are several backgrounds. One is the investor relationship we had and the number of investors we had in the past, and we wanted to enter a new era, so the new Toshiba, and that is where then the people decided to go private, because we thought if you go private, we can do things faster and we can actually pursue our own way that we had in mind. So that was the whole background of it.
Well, when you think about it, though, Toshiba, the old Toshiba, did have resources and people and the like. What's the big change in how those resources and how those people are being allocated that make the new private Toshiba a different organization?
I think the main point we have to consider, Toshiba was a very big company and we had many fields that we were entertaining. So I think it's kind of sharpening the focus to some specific fields where Toshiba want to be active, where's the most innovation, and where are the markets we can gain most money in the future. That was basically the driving force of the decision.
Well, Armin, so then when you think about it, can you give us a couple of those, like say the top 3 application spaces that you feel are important for Toshiba to address?
Yes. Actually, as I already mentioned, it's like semiconductors is one field. So actually it's called electronic device and storage solutions. And there are semiconductors and as well as storage solutions, hard disk drives, for example, for data centers and so on. The other part of the company, from a top point of view, it is energy systems and solutions, infrastructure systems and solutions, and the new digital solutions, because digitalization, having data, access to data, utilizing data with kind of new ways of bringing out software is what our company is going to be in. And that is stretching across the entire company. So it means the other part that I didn't mention is that we have changed structure slightly. We have been a company that had in-house companies. Now that has changed to a divisional structure, and that was for the main purpose of enhancing the synergy between the individual parts, because we wanted to see how do we create kind of more benefit in the crosstalk between the companies so that we can actually define the new solutions that are required.
So divisions as opposed to companies, so it's easier to communicate between the different groups.
Right, exactly. Of course, there's one additional benefit. We had staff function in the corporate part as well as in the companies, individual companies, and we've been thinning that layer, so we've been trying to free up resources, money that now go more into R&D and also saving some of the cost.
Well, you're not going to get any engineer to complain about reducing middle management. But obviously there are savings to be had there. Now, the thing about digitization, though, it's a huge beast. Are there any specific aspects of digitization that Toshiba wants to address, or is it all tied into the memory and other aspects of the Toshiba lineup?
Well, it's actually in all these solution areas that I just mentioned, digitization is meaning that you need to get access to data. And one of the driving forces behind that is the change in our industry, the move towards sustainability, circular economy, and also the regenerative part following that as an over next step. And that is where you need to have all the various competences in place in order to drive that forward. And that's where you need to have data as well as software in order to complement that. Even for the power semiconductor part, it is very important, because when you try to really set up new solutions that go for the best level of efficiency, for example, you may need help of software. You just heard about AI type of solutions. It plays into it. So we need new ways in terms of driving the development of the future solutions.
Since you bring up AI, how much is AI going to play a role in Toshiba's future digitalization plans?
Well, AI is obviously a trend that is used everywhere, and we also need that. One of the purposes, of course, gaining efficiency, but the other part is also trying to explore new grounds. But of course, there are several aspects that you need to consider how to do that. Of course, in terms of production, you try to utilize that as much as possible already today in order to gain several improvements in terms of efficiency, cost, productivity, whatever you want to say. So
now, you talk about these bins, memory and data and the like. Are there any specific application spaces that you're directly addressing, or is it one size fits all?
No, it's actually primarily for I can only speak for the semiconductor part. It's automotive and industrial. No? Electrification is certainly one thing. Connected with that is how do you generate all the electricity for, storing the energy in cars or whatever in the home. And the other part is the industrial part. It's like how do you improve production, for example. No? And of course, they are connected with that is infrastructure. So there are a lot of issues in trying to bring out new solutions for infrastructure in general. And that is basically the industrial path where new innovations are needed.
Exactly. So, innovation's always needed, isn't it? Right? When you think about the pressure to develop and the pressure for growth and all, now that you have the new organization and you're trying to get it all organized and pointed in the right direction, what do you see as the next step?
Well, the next step is, of course, bringing out the solutions, because one of the things, I get that question asked very often, because we now have the factories in place. We have got the Rome-Toshiba collaboration for gaining access to more capacity, and capacity was the primary first part to resolve. The next part is the next level of innovation and development of the products, and that's what we are focusing right now. So we need to go for next generation over next generation. We need to get a view as to what the applications want exactly, and then tailor those solutions exactly to what those things need. And that is a very interactive part. We need to have a lot of communication, and on that background, to highlight another part is that's why in the European market we also have now set up an R&D location to strengthen those kind of collaborations with the local markets, and that is also trying to fulfill the needs of the company to be stronger in the overseas market.
Well, everything is overseas if you look at it in one way or another, right?
Yes, depending on where you stand. Right?
Depending on where you stand. Well, the old saying, where you stand depends on where you sit, right?
Yes, exactly, yes.
So are there any other elements of this that you'd like to bring out for our audience, anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up?
I think the clarification of the product portfolio in semiconductors. I think as we were quite wide in the past, we've been shrinking that a little bit. So the focus is on power, but there are also other components. Everything that controls the power semiconductor that sits in front of it is belonging to the new focus of the company. So we also bring out other devices that do the control of the algorithms or run the algorithms. We also have couplers, for example, and other devices that connect into the power stages and sit around the power stages. And that is basically then the completion of the portfolio.
Well, you got to control everything. I mean, when it comes to power, it really is a gestalt because it's hard to isolate one piece of the power equation.
Well, it's true. But of course, there's this, when you say like power, then the control needed to run and optimize the power stages is one of the fundamental elements. So it means you have to be knowledgeable in both parts, Otherwise, you don't understand what you have to do on the other side, And that's why the connection of the two is very important for us.
Very cool. So, Armin, is there anything else you wanted to leave our audience with before I let you go?
Well, I think the next event is coming up. It's the Electronica in November. We're going to be there, so we would be very happy if you could welcome many of the visitors and ask us questions about our company, the products that we now have, the new generations that are coming out. So looking forward to that.
Very cool, Armin. Thank you so much for giving us the time at this event to talk. I really do appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it too. Thanks very much, Alex.